wine. Then we have the non-alcoholic beverage sector. And for the purpose of this research, we grouped it under soft drinks, carbonated soft drinks, and then soft drinks, the non-carbonated types, and then the energy drink. Now, in terms of overview, for beverages or the beverage market in Nigeria, soft drinks, for example, is the largest segment, and it comprises the carbonated, non-carbonated, and energy drink type. In the alcoholic beer segment, the alcoholic segment is dominated by the beer, and it's followed by spirits, and then it's followed by wine. The wine market is heavily reliant on imports and is driven primarily by economy brands or low price brands. And then we see same in the spirits market. There's an active domestic production of spirits in Nigeria, but you see that the low price brands also tend to dominate the market. Now, the Nigerian beverage market has also seen significant exports to other African markets, and we believe that it's set to benefit greatly from the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Let's take a look at some of the key players in the alcoholic beverage market. We have the Nigerian breweries, we have Guinness Nigeria PLC, we have International Breweries PLC, Intercontinental Distilleries, and then we have Grand Oak Limited. Now, these are some of the key players. It doesn't mean that these are the only players in the market. There are several companies in the market. Some are producing within state, whilst others are producing and distributing to all parts of the Nigerian economy. And you've seen that we've highlighted some of the brands that these big brands dominate in the market. Star, Henneke, Golda, more Tiger brands, they are all under the Nigerian brewery brand. And then we can also see the images of the products. So if you are a fan of any of these in the Nigerian beverage markets, I'm sure you can relate by seeing the images of the brands listed above. Then when we take the non-alcoholic beverage market, we have the likes of Coca-Cola, HBC, Seaway Group, 7-Up Bottling Company, Monarch Beverage Limited, and VG Industry Nigeria also dominating within the non-alcoholic space with different brands in the market. Now, just by looking at the brands of just these key players, you can get a sense that the market is highly competitive because one player can introduce multiple brands of the same beverage type into the market. It gives you a sense of how competitive the market is. Now, let's look at the distribution channels for beverages in Nigeria. So there are three main large channels. We have the key distributors, we have key accounts, and then we have party distribution. Now, key distributors are usually merchandisers or bulk breakers who buy in volume from the manufacturers and then extend the distribution to other parts of Nigeria. So you would have some key distributors having focus on particular states, and then you have some key distributors who have major outlets in different states across Nigeria. The key distributors normally work with bulk breakers who would then sell it out to wholesalers and then to retailers, and then it gets to the general market or the open market and then to the final consumer. Then we have key accounts. So key accounts usually consist of modern trade points such as shopping malls, supermarkets, hotels, and restaurants. And in some cases, you see some key distributors having key accounts, and then sometimes you see manufacturers also connecting directly with some of these key accounts and selling directly to them. Then we have party distribution. Party distribution involves direct sales or distribution of the product to the direct consumer at events, major events in Nigeria. So these are the three broad channels, but embedded in each of these channels are other layers of distribution, and bottom line, the product gets to the final consumer. Now, we've also seen online distribution catching up or rising in the Nigerian economy. And as we get into it, you see the percentage of consumers that usually purchase different types of beverages from online sources. So now let's take a closer look at the alcoholic beverage sector. Like I said, we are looking at beer, we are looking at spirits, and then we are looking at wine. So we'll start with beer. So Nigeria ranks the second highest beer consuming country in Africa. It follows South Africa, and on average, about 2 million tons of beer is consumed annually. This is coming from the World Health Organization. And when you look at my right, you would see the pattern of consumption from 2013 to 2022. You would see that there's been a slight, well, quite a moderate dip in beer consumption. In the first 5 years of my chart, that's 2013 to 2017, you see that it's averaging about 2.5 million tons. Then in the last half of my chart, you see that it's averaging about 1.8 million tons. So there's been a dip in the consumption volumes. Then in terms of spend, you would see that Nigerians on average spend mostly less than 5,000 on beer each week. And you see that about 75% of our respondents were spending less than 5,000 naira on beer each week. But the average spend itself was around 4,000 naira. Then you would see that parents and non-parents, there are no significant differences. We wanted to see whether there were significant differences between people with children and people without children. There were no significant differences when it came to beer. And you would see that males also tend to spend more than females, averaging about 4,400, whilst females were spending about 3,300 on beer, which is to be expected. So we were not too surprised by this result. But what is interesting for us is the spend per different educational levels. We saw that people with university degree spent quite a significant amount more than some of the other respondents that we had in the survey. They actually spent above the average, spending about 5,300 naira per week on beverages, which is far above the average for the entire sample size. All right, so we are going to take a look at the brands that dominate in the market. So what we intended to do, like I earlier on hinted, there's a lot of competition in the market. So you see that one company, one manufacturer would have multiple brands of the same beverage type in the market. So here you will see all the brands that Nigerian Brewery represents listed here. We have them representing Henneke, Life, Tiger Star, Star Radler, Desperado, all within the beer category. Then we see international breweries also representing Hero, Trophy, Budweiser, then Guinness representing Guinness, and then Smirnoff Ice. And then we see the other smaller brands in the market. So when we look at the broader market, you would say that Nigerian breweries dominate the market based on the sample size that we worked with and based on the results in terms of the question that we asked consumers was which beer brand they consumed the most in the week preceding the survey. And we saw that overall, Hero was the top brand, accounting for about 20% of consumer responses. However, this said, you will see that in terms of the general beer market, Nigerian breweries will be leading with about 50% of the consumption being any one of their products. But in terms of brand specifics, Hero topped, followed by Henneke, then it was followed by Life Beer, then it was followed by Trophy, and then the fifth most popular would be the Tiger brand. Yeah, then of course there are other small brands in the market which are also making waves in particular states or catching up with some of the top brands in the market. So let's look at prices. We would notice here that the Nigerian beverage market, especially for beer, is price sensitive, but the price sensitivity in the alcoholic segment tend to be not as strong as the price sensitivity in the non-alcoholic segment. And as we go through the non-alcoholic segment, I'm sure it will become quite obvious to us. So the hero brand, which topped the market, this is it. I hope you can see my cursor, is priced based on when we collected this price data in 2024, it was priced at 550 naira going for the 60 cl bottle, whilst the Heineken was going for 800 naira for the 33 cl bottle. So you can see that price, though it plays a role in consumer decisions, is not such a big factor here for beer. All right. So what are the factors that are influencing brand selection for beer? So I think this is every manufacturer is trying to answer. Consumers are pointing to taste, great taste, as what drives their patronage of particular brands. But what will be interesting to look at more is what consumers consider to be tasty when it comes to the beer brand. The focus of this research, we did not cover that, but it will be interesting to look at it in subsequent studies. This is followed by brand popularity, accounting for 10% of most consumer choices, then availability accounting for about 5%, and then the perception of whether or not it has healthy ingredients also accounting for 5%. Price is contributing to just about 3% of consumer choices. Then in terms of the purchase points, the dominant purchase point for the beer segment would be the pubs or bar, which is not too surprising. So what are the expectations for the beer market? We're expecting that in the medium to long term, we may see some drop in beer's dominance, but it will still maintain its dominance, as we've seen already in the charts in terms of the consumption levels. But also, as the Nigerian economy stabilizes and begins to grow, we expect that beer should take back the market dominance in the market and then regain some of its market share. So that leads us to the spirit market. So with the spirit market, what stood out for us or stood out in this research was that though there are different subcategories of spirit brands, we have the whiskey, we have the vodka, we have the gin, we have the bitters, which is quite popular in Africa. Bitters was one of the top subcategories in the spirit market, and Action Bitters topped that. So for whiskey, we saw a lot of consumers going for Jameson. Then for vodka, we saw a lot of consumers going for Smirnoff. And for gin, we saw a lot of consumers going for Chelsea. One of the key things to note in the spirits market is that prices vary. Price can be as low as 1 or as much as 10 times the price of another. So because spirits can sometimes be a prestige offering, and so the prices tend to vary, which I'm sure if you're familiar with the market, it will be quite something that you may have observed as well. And one thing to note is that the spirits market in Nigeria has a very large unregulated market. Now, we've seen some of the players innovating to get a share of that unregulated market with the small size packaging, with the PET bottle packaging and the likes, but the unregulated market still remains a big chunk of the spirit market. And so we are expecting that there will be some innovations along those lines to capture some of that market as well. Interestingly, for the spirit market, you would see that even though taste is a great factor in brand selection, it accounts for just about 47% of consumer choices. What surprised us was the perception of whether the spirits brand that they are consuming offer them some healthy ingredients or some health benefits. And about 70% of consumers were making this choice because of that. And so it's not surprising that we saw Action Bitters, which is usually, the bitter brand is usually has the connotation of herbs and the likes. And so I think consumers are interpreting that as healthy ingredients, and as a result, is heavily influencing some of the decisions that they are making in terms of which brand to select or which brand to go for. The purchase points are not so clearly defined. You see that there is a good percentage going through the supermarkets and then also in the pubs and then in the bars, which also shows that some consumers are buying and consuming at home, especially when they're buying from supermarkets and from open markets and the like. Now, we expect a lot of innovation in the spirits market because we've seen a lot of growing interest from the youth in the spirits market. So the increasing in demand for spirits is expected to be sustained. And we also expect that producers will innovate to meet some of the expectations of the youth for this market. So we'll move on to the wine market. Now, like I said earlier, imports drive the wine market. There is some level of domestic production, but it's still at its early stages. There are some areas in Nigeria, like Jos, where grape cultivation, the climate can support grape cultivation. So we've seen elements of that happening. And then we've also seen the production of wine using some other fruits like pawpaw and the likes. So it's still at its infant stage, and we expect more in the future for domestic wine production in Nigeria. On average, people spend a lot more on wine than they do spend on spirits and on beer. We see that on average, consumers will spend about 11,000 naira, that is in 2024, on wine compared to about 7,000 naira for spirits and then 4,000 naira for beer. Then we also saw that there was quite a significant difference in the spend of parents and the non-parents. We saw parents spending relatively more on spirits than non-parents did. And then we also saw university graduates also spending significantly more than other people with different education levels. In terms of the favorite purchase points, you would see that it's dominated by supermarkets, and then we see some purchases also happening in pubs and then in bars. But like the spirit markets, we can see that there's a lot of home consumption for wines, and as people buy from supermarkets to consume at homes or to share with family. So for the Nigerian wine market, the expectation is that because of the difficulties in the economic fluctuations, we expect that there would be some reduction in demand for wine because of the price points that wine usually come at. And but we expect that as things improve, the market will rebound. Then we have the non-alcoholic beverage sector. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to look at soft drinks in both the carbonated and non-carbonated segments, and then we'll look at energy drinks. So Nigeria ranks the 4th largest soft drink market in the world. In terms of categories, the carbonated market is significantly larger than the non-carbonated market. Based on our survey, we found about 81% of total sales happening in the carbonated segment and about 19% happening in the non-carbonated segment. Some of the major players, which we mentioned earlier, are Nigerian Bottling Company and then 7-Up Bottling Company. Now, it's interesting to note that when consumers were asked what their favorite brands were or the brands they consumed the most the week preceding the survey, we saw about 70% of their selection being brands that have been introduced by the Nigerian Bottling Company and then the 7-Up Bottling Company. So the likes of Coca-Cola, Fanta, Pepsi, accounting for about 70% of the total demand. In terms of consumption levels, we noticed that about 6 bottles are consumed each week by the average Nigerian, and they spend about 2,500 naira on soft drinks. We also saw that parents tend to spend more on soft drinks, which is not too surprising given that they have to spend for their children. Most children take soft drinks to schools these days and the likes. We also saw that there weren't any significant differences between the genders, and there weren't much significant differences in the education level. So soft drinks is a general drink that is enjoyed by almost every Nigerian in the market. So the top brands, I've already hinted at this. So the top 10 carbonated soft drink brands that consumers voted for would be number 1, Coca-Cola, followed by Fanta, Pepsi, Guinness Malt, Sprite, Smooth Chapman, and then with 7-Up being the 10th most favorite carbonated brand. Then the non-carbonated soft drink brand, we had Five Alive, Nutrimilk, Chivita, Hollandia Yogurt, Sosa, Chi Exotic, and then we have Palpi also coming in at number 10. There are more details in the main report, which I believe we can glean once we get the report. In terms of pricing, we noticed an interesting trend in the way companies are pricing soft drinks in the market. So if you would look at the chart closely, you would see that this is Coca-Cola. As of 2024, when we did the price data collection, it was going for the 50 cl, this is the same supermarket, an online supermarket, and the same product was going for 430 naira for the 50 cl. Now you see new brands such as these giving higher volumes and yet reducing the price. So you see a general pattern where new entrants tend to reduce the price and yet give you more value or more volume for the same or even lesser of what you would have spent with a more known brand. So we notice this concept of more for less in order to drive brand penetration in the market. In terms of the factors that facilitate consumer choices of for brands in the market, we saw some significant differences consumers of the non-carbonated segment making that choice because of taste. Interestingly, a lot of them would choose a particular non-carbonated beverage brand because of the health ingredients, whilst just about 3% of the respondents would consider that in a carbonated beverage brand. So it shows the perception of consumers around the non-carbonated beverage brands offering more health benefits than the carbonated counterparts. We also saw that in terms of the purchase points, it's dominated by supermarkets, but we also see a lot of purchases also happening in shopping malls, street hawking, and the likes. In terms of online, it was quite low at just 0.2%. For the soft drink market, we expect more players to join the market. We expect that the market is going to grow because of the growing population and especially as disposable incomes increase. And also, especially as different brands and different distributors try to access more markets outside of Nigeria, we expect that the market should grow and have some more brands introduced in the market. Then the energy drink market. Now, the Nigerian energy drink market is rapidly growing. It's expected to have a cumulated average growth rate of 14.1% in the next 5 years, and is expected to grow even higher than the continent's average. We also see that in terms of spend, people are spending about an average of 3,000 naira per week on soft drinks. And when you consider the prices of the different brands, this can potentially buy you 6 bottles of a low price soft drink brand, energy drink brand, or 2 of the expensive options. One of the brands that led the market was the Fearless brand. The Fearless brand led the market with about 44% of sales. Consumers were just interested in the Fearless brand, and we'll look at more of the factors that consumers consider when selecting that brand. We saw that a lot of them were considering the price, a lot of them were also considering the brand popularity and then taste. So price plays a key role in the brand selection of energy drinks. Then we also saw that in terms of customer loyalty, which I'll speak more to in the subsequent slides, for the energy drink market, just about 50% of energy drink consumers remain loyal to the preferred brand. And we have about the remaining 50% ready to change or switch brands or try new things. So it will be quite interesting to see how the market develops with some of these trends. In terms of spend, we saw parents spending significantly more, almost twice as much as non-parents in this segment as well. And then we saw that people with technical and then secondary education also tend to spend more. Arguably, though we didn't explore the reasons behind this, possibly people who tend to exert more pressure at work may need more boosts throughout the day. And we also noticed an interesting trend of students drinking energy drinks a lot and spending on energy drinks. So more them giving reasons as it helps keeps them focused and such, and because of that, they tend to patronize energy drinks whilst they are having exams. So in terms of prices, the price ranges are wide. We see the Fearless brand, which is the top brand in the market, is actually also one of the cheapest brand in the market. It's going for 400 and it was going for 415 naira in 2024 for the 50 cl, whilst the premium brands such as Red Bull was going for 1,525 naira for half the volume the Fearless brand of it. So it speaks to how price sensitive this market is. And of course, given that a lot of the people who spend most are people with secondary education, most likely their earning powers are not as high. And so price is a key consideration when considering which energy drink to go for. In terms of purchase points, supermarkets, tops, followed by the open markets, and then we have shopping malls also representing. So a lot of people choose energy drinks thinking that it offers health benefits. And unfortunately, a lot of the products in the market lack some of these added benefits. So we anticipate that producers will rise to fill in this gap by actually providing some of the health benefits that consumers perceive to be getting as they consume these different energy drinks. So a summary of all that we've looked at for the alcoholic beverage sector. So in terms of the market share, we see beer accounting for 55%, spirit accounting for 30%, wine accounting for 15%. The top brands in the beer category was the Hero brand. For the spirit category, we see Action Bitters topping, but then for the different subcategories, we see different brands topping as well. For the wine, we saw Four Cousins topping, which is a moderately priced brand in the market. Then for the spend or the price ranges, they are wide and varying. For beer, as low as 182 naira to as high as 1,000 naira. For spirits and wine, the ranges are even more wider than even for the beer category. Then we see the spend per week, spend on wine being significantly higher than the other categories. Of course, given the price points that wines are usually sold at. Then in terms of brand loyalty, we saw that beer consumers tend to be more loyal. About 60% of beer consumers will stick to the brand that they like. And then we also saw that consumers in the spirit markets are much more fickle than the consumers in the beer or wine market. The purchase points, we see that the popular ones for beer will be the pub, dominating with 78% of all purchases, followed by then we'll see spirits and wine all having a similar structure with the supermarkets dominating. Then for the non-alcoholic segment, in terms of the market share, we see that the carbonated soft drink market dominates with about 78%. followed by the non-carbonated with 12%, and then the energy drinks accounting for 10%. Top brands, Coca-Cola for soft drinks, Five Alive for the non-carbonated soft drink, and then the Fearless brand for the energy drink segment. The price points not as wide as in the alcoholic sector, speaking to how even though they are price sensitive, their sensitivity is relatively lower than consumers in the alcoholic sector. Then we have average spend. People spending more in the non-carbonated sector than they are spending in the carbonated sector. In terms of brand loyalty, on average, averaging around 53 in the non-alcoholic beverage market. However, we see that there isn't significant differences across the beverage type, which means more consumers are open to exploring new brands and trying to see whether their taste preferences, their health requirements can be satisfied by new brands entering the market. Then we saw supermarkets and the open markets being the most popular purchase points for non-alcoholic beverages in the market. So we'll take a look at some trends. So a trend that we identified was the fact that up to 31% of disposable income was spent on alcohol in the market. Now, the actual rate was between 9% and 31%, but some were spending as high as 31% on alcohol. And generally, alcohol consumption levels are high, averaging about 16.1 liter annually per person on average, compared to the African average of 15.5 liters per person. Just before we look at some of these other facts on this, my right, let's take a look at the breakdown of the different income levels and how much of their income they were spending on alcohol. So those who earned less than 550,000 naira were spending up to 20% of their income on alcohol. Those who earned between 50,000 naira and 200,000 naira were spending between 9% and 38% of their income. Those who earned between 200,000 naira and 500,000 naira were spending about 6 to 15%. Then those who earned more than 500,000 naira were spending about 19% on alcohol. We see that the spend on wine being higher. Then we also saw that adults with children spent about 6% more on average than those without children. So what are they spending on? The top brands that we discussed in the market. And then we've also seen the different purchase points. So if you are targeting to the alcoholic beverage markets, depending on the products that you intend to bring to the market, you know which areas to target your advertising or marketing, and which consumer demographic is most likely to spend more on your products. In terms of the outlook for the market, in the soft drink category, expect more investments, especially in the non-carbonated soft drink sector, because there isn't as much competition there as there is in the carbonated sector. And then, of course, the brand loyalty levels are also quite moderate at 50%, leaving a lot of room for consumers to explore options in the market. And the growing health consciousness will drive consumers to continue seeking out products that will meet that demand or that need. Then for the energy drinks market, we anticipate several brands in the market along similar lines for the non-carbonated market, because we believe that the market is still yet to meet the needs of consumers, especially with a lot of consumers perceiving that energy drinks provide them some type of health benefits, when usually the products in the market do not actually do that. Then in the spirits market, we see that there's a lot of room for innovation for new brands, especially because of the growing youth interest in spirits, and then the large unregulated market. We see that producers and manufacturers will innovate to capture some of these gaps in the market in order to elevate their brands. And in terms of marketing, branding, and packaging, we expect that the competition in the market itself provides a lot of opportunities for companies that are involved in marketing and branding and packaging of different products. Every company is trying to have a leg up on the other brand, and because of that, innovations in this segment too are expected, and we know that companies that are able to innovate very well are going to be able to capture the attention of some of these manufacturers so that they can also stay ahead of the curve. So that's it. That's a summary of the results in our beverage reports. Like I said, we'll be sharing more of details in the main report once it's ready and once we share it with you. For now, this brings me to the end of our presentation, and I'll be ready to take any questions that we may have. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you very much, Anita, for this. I picked a few takeaways from the presentations you have just done. But before I go into mine, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box, and then we will be happy to respond to them. Okay, so Anita, before I go to mine, one wants to know what kind of non-glass bottle packaging is accepted at the moment in the market?
The dominant non-glass bottling method is the PET bottle.
Okay.
So I think, let me just pull up even some of the images. So if you can see, energy drinks are usually packaged in can or metal bottles. But even with that, see a lot of the brands still packaging in the PET bottles. The Fearless brand, which is the most popular, is in the PET bottle. And so across board. So you see for the soft drinks as well. But for the alcoholic segment, largely is the glass bottle, especially for beer, and then the metal bottle or the cans for beer. But in the spirit segment, why the market is actually moving fast in that segment is because of the PET bottling that they've introduced. PET bottling enables them to do smaller sizes, and then of course the cost involved is much lower than it would have been to go for the glass bottling. So PET bottling is one of the dominant packaging types for the market.
Okay. Someone else wants to know the role of credit in the market.
So yes, credit, like any African market, credit plays a big role. But what is interesting in the Nigerian market is that, so depending on how popular or the level of demand or customer acceptance for your brand would tell how much of credit you would have to give. So for the very active players in the market, like the dominant brands, we had a meeting with, like I mentioned, we interviewed some manufacturers and then it's the associations, and a lot of them were averse to credit. However, some were willing to consider credit so far as you would provide them with a bank guarantee. They could give you a payback period of up to 3 months to pay back, but most of them were not for credit. But for new brands entering the market, in order to compete well in the market, distributors and wholesalers would want you to give them some credit. And what was interesting to note was that even though some manufacturers will not give credit out to the distributors or the key accounts, you would see that when in the bulk breaking process, some distributors offer credit to some of their trusted wholesalers and their retailers. So it's not clear cut. It depends on the brand acceptance. It also depends on how credible and the level of the relationship we've had with the manufacturer. And then it also depends on whether it is a new brand or it's an existing brand in the market. But credit definitely plays a role.
Okay, so one last question and then we can wrap up. one wants to know how the party distribution system works.
Okay, so for the party distribution, it's all about selling directly to events. So maybe there's a major concert or a major event, a key distributor or even the manufacturer can send their own refrigeration vans or trucks to the event and distribute directly to participants of the event. So in this case, you would see manufacturers having their own party refrigeration trucks that actively bid for contracts to distribute drinks to particular events. And then you also see some key distributors also doing same. So that's how the party distribution works.
Okay, so one last one, then we wrap up properly. Okay, so someone wants to know if there are still opportunities in the market, given the different brands that are already in the market.
Certainly, there are still opportunities. One of the biggest thing going for Nigeria is how large the market is. It's a very large market. It's a youthful market. Disposable incomes are rising, albeit amid some economic challenges. And then the market is not fully saturated yet. Yeah, there are a lot of brands in the market, but as we saw from the consumer loyalty levels, especially within the soft drink category, averaging about 50%. So you will see that there are about 45 to 50% of consumers that are open to trying new brands, open to exploring new brands, and they actively do this. Interestingly, during our in-depth interviews with some of the consumers, we try to find out if when they visit a shop to buy their brand of their preferred brand of beverage and the shop does not have it, how would they opt for new options? Most of them will not opt for new options at that moment, but if they visit the next shop and the next shop does not have, they are changing their brand choices. So people are open, they can easily switch. And because of that, it offers opportunities for innovation in the market and for new entrants as well. So I would advise that you make sure you do your research before you get into it and make sure that you find the right niche for your product.
Thank you very much. So my key takeaways are Nigeria is the second largest consumer of alcoholic beverage in Africa. Beer is the highest beer is the highest when it comes to alcoholic consumption. Nigeria is the fourth largest soft drink market in the world, and about 6 bottles of soft drinks are consumed weekly. People spend up to 31% of their monthly income on beverages. And for those who are looking to compete favorably in the market, what they've done is they've increased the volume of product in terms of the size of the bottles, but then reduce the price to compete favorably with the established products in the market. That brings us to the end of the webinar. I would like to thank you very much for joining us for this. We are available for enquiries. I think our emails will be shared. We will also share the webinar with those who registered and are part of it. We will stay tuned for future webinars from Famous Advisory. Like we say, we are always inspired to deliver value. Do contact us if you have any information, or if there are further questions that you need to ask, you can send an email to Anita, whose email address is there, and to myself as well. We look forward to having you again on the next webinar.